Who was the gaseous Beatle?
Paul.
That's Ringo Starr casually exposing Paul McCartney as the Beatles' biggest fart problem. And yes, that's a real quote from a 2025 interview. At 85 years old, Ringo's done playing nice. He's spilling everything. From studio disasters to octopus attacks to the awkward truth about meeting Elvis, we're breaking down 6 wild Beatles secrets that'll change how you hear every classic song. And stick around until the end to hear the story about how they ruined entire recording sessions by getting too high and thinking they were geniuses. Ringo's on a truth-telling spree. From Jimmy Kimmel to BBC Breakfast to multiple AP interviews this year, he's done with the sanitized Beatles mythology. At 85, with nothing left to prove, he's revealing the petty grudges, embarrassing moments, and band dynamics nobody talks about. This isn't your parents' Beatles documentary. These are 6 stories that hardcore fans have never heard. Let's start with the gut punch. Imagine joining the biggest band in the world, walking into Abbey Road Studios for your first real session, and finding out your producer thinks you're not good enough. That's exactly what happened to Ringo.
What is a few of your proudest moments?
Well, one of the most exciting was we made a record, and I went through hell personally because George Martin had this Andy White, the session drummer. Anyway, he didn't know they changed drummers, and I was coming, and I made him apologize every day.
Made him apologize every single day. That's the pettiness we love. Here's what Ringo's talking about. On September 11, 1962, the Beatles arrived at Abbey Road to record Love Me Do, their debut single. George Martin, uncertain about the new drummer who'd just replaced Pete Best, brought in session drummer Andy White as insurance. White was paid £5 and 15 shillings for 3 hours of work and played drums on the version that ended up on the Please Please Me album and most later releases. Ringo? He got relegated to tambourine. On P.S. I Love You, he played maracas. The kicker? There were actually 3 versions of Love Me Do, recorded with 3 different drummers. Pete Best during the audition, Ringo on September 4th, and Andy White on September 11th. You can tell which version you're hearing by one detail. If there's tambourine, that's White on drums with Ringo on percussion. No tambourine, that's Ringo's version. But here's what makes this story beautiful. Ringo didn't quit. He didn't sulk. He made George Martin apologize daily and then became one of the most influential drummers in history. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming legendary. Remember that quote from the opening? Let's get the full story, because it's even better than you think.
We need an audience of some sort, either a surprise audience like we might get tomorrow, or a
We've got to get. I just thought I'd let you know.
Thank you.
Oh, he's going to sit here silent, looking at you. No, I'll tell you about it.
That's the thing about these guys. No matter what was going on, always making music from wherever it may come.
Yeah, but the thing with that was we learned that when we were in a band, when we started out, and, if anybody let a silent one go, they would try and get away with it. And it caused terrible trouble. I mean, what wasn't it? Was it came to
People think Yoko divided the band, and in fact, it was just gas. Yeah.
So anyway, we realized, okay, it was me. Or it was him. It doesn't matter, but you just said it and everything calmed down.
Who was the gaseous Beatle?
Paul.
Paul McCartney, the bass player, the pretty one, the gas Beatle of the Beatles. This might sound ridiculous, but it's actually profound band psychology. Ringo's point is that when 4 guys are crammed in a van driving hundreds of miles between gigs, or locked in a studio for 12-hour sessions, small tensions become massive. Someone farts, nobody admits it, suspicion builds, resentment grows. But once they established the rule, just own it immediately, everything calmed down. It's actually a metaphor for how they handled bigger conflicts. Honesty diffused tension. The fact that Ringo throws Paul under the bus here, pun intended, is comedy gold. When the interviewer jokes that people think Yoko divided the band when it was really just gas, Ringo doesn't disagree. He just names Paul as the culprit. That's a man who's lived long enough to find the humor in everything. Everyone knows Octopus's Garden. It's the whimsical children's song about living under the sea, but the origin story is absolutely bonkers.
I flew to Sardinia. I'm getting out of here. I went to Sardinia and, I worked with Peter Sellers, and his boat was there.
Uh-huh.
And so he lent us his boat to in those days, Maureen and two of my kids. And two things happened. One was the nanny we had with us was carrying Jason, who was a little kid. And we were just climbing over rocks and that, and then she stopped. And she said, "Take the baby." "What? Take the baby?" She said, "Take the baby." So I took my son, and I said, "Well, what's going on?" And there was an octopus wrapped around the leg.
Wait, an actual octopus wrapped around the nanny's leg. This isn't a cute metaphor. A real cephalopod attacked their childcare provider. Imagine being that nanny. So how was your trip? Oh, fine, except for the octopus assault. But it gets better. After the octopus incident, they went to lunch on Peter Sellers' boat and ordered fish and chips. What did they get instead? Octopus. They ate the enemy. And then, Ringo admits, he got properly stoned, and the boat's captain started telling him about how octopuses collect shiny stones and tins from the ocean floor to build gardens around their caves. According to research, this is actually true. Common octopuses are surprisingly aesthetic creatures who arrange objects around their dens. When you're stoned on a boat in Sardinia, having just experienced an octopus attack and eaten octopus for lunch, hearing that they're actually underwater interior designers, that's when you write one of Abbey Road's most beloved songs. Ringo grabbed his guitar, which he only knew 3 chords on, and Octopus's Garden was born. Here's one that hurts. In August 1968, during the White Album sessions, Ringo walked out, just left, and what he reveals about why is heartbreaking.
Because on the White Album, I left the band.
Uh-huh.
And I left the band because I didn't think I was being part of it, and I was playing great, and you know, I always was that guy. I went and knocked at John's door. And I said, "Man, you know, I feel you three are so close, you know, and I'm out of it." And he goes, "I thought it was you three." And then I went to Paul's, and I said, "Hi, man, yeah, you know, I've got to tell you, I feel like I'm, you know, not part of the band, and I'm not playing good." And he said, "You know, it's you three are really close." He says, "I thought it was you three."
Each one of them thought the other 3 were the tight unit. This is the saddest game of telephone in rock history. Ringo felt excluded and went to John, who said, "I thought it was you 3. Then he went to Paul, who said the exact same thing. The tensions that were tearing them apart made each member feel isolated, even though they were all feeling the exact same isolation. Ringo flew to Sardinia, yes, the octopus boat trip, and when he returned on September 5th, his drum kit was covered in flowers. George Harrison's idea. That's brotherhood right there. The White Album sessions were notoriously brutal, with George also temporarily walking out, but they always came back. Why? Because despite everything, they were brothers. In 1965, the Beatles, the biggest band on the planet, were terrified. Why? They were about to meet Elvis Presley.
We met Elvis, we met Willie Nelson several times, and you know, Pete Drake was like at the time the big pedal steel player.
You met Elvis. I don't know that many people who I've spoken to who I can say that to.
Yeah. Well, it was fixed up that the 4 of us, we were invited over. So, okay, go see Elvis. And it was a magical musical moment. We went in and walked down. Elvis was watching TV, playing bass in his house. And then he had, okay, lads, he had a Telecommander, first one we'd ever seen. It was like, what? Look at that, clicking it on and off. And so we just hung out, really. But we had nobody taking photos in those days.
No photos, no recordings. Just the Beatles and Elvis Presley in a house in Bel Air, with Elvis casually playing bass while watching TV. On August 27, 1965, the meeting finally happened after their manager Brian Epstein negotiated with Colonel Tom Parker for over a year. The rules were strict. The Fab Four had to come to Elvis, not the other way around. Protocol for rock royalty. According to multiple accounts, things were incredibly awkward at first. The Beatles just sat there staring at their idol, starstruck into silence, until Elvis reportedly said, "If you guys are just gonna sit around and stare at me, I'm going to bed." That broke the ice. They jammed together, talked about American rock and roll, and spent 4 hours hanging out. John later said he kept thinking, "It's Elvis, it's Elvis, it's actually Elvis." Even at the height of Beatlemania, Elvis was the idol. Priscilla Presley, who was there, said the Beatles were so cute, but they were so nervous. These were the four guys who had teenage girls fainting in the streets, and they were nervous wrecks meeting a fellow musician. Every Beatles fan has wondered, how much did drugs influence the creative process? Ringo just gave us the answer, and it's hilarious.
You know, we didn't get out of our minds and make music. We realized really early on, and I love this, what I'm going to say was that we were drinking cups of tea. The change was great last night when you're out of it, but not in the studio, because every time we sort of got a little high in the studio, we'd play and we'd, yeah, wow, yeah, man, wow, and we'd all go home with a little tape and we'd all come back the next morning. Got to do it again.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's shit, absolute shit.
But I bet you thought you sounded like fire.
No,
when you were
at
doing
the
all
time,
that.
you're like,
Yeah.
nothing like
Feeling the
this.
They'd get high, play something, think it was revolutionary, take the tape home, listen sober, realize it was garbage, do it all over again. This destroys the myth that drugs made the Beatles' music better. Psychedelics influenced the themes and imagery, but the actual craft required sobriety, discipline, and cups of tea. The "wow, got you man" bit is Ringo perfectly imitating stoned musicians thinking they're geniuses. At 85, Ringo isn't protecting anyone's image. He's telling you about drum booth humiliations, gas problems, octopus attacks, and ruined studio sessions. And through it all, you see what made the Beatles special. They admitted when they screwed up. They came back when they walked out, and they laughed at themselves. If you want more untold stories from music's biggest legends, hit subscribe.